Reverend Mealing, Reverend Susan Mealing, Susan Mealing, Lady Dory Bell, Lady Mealing America. I've been known by a few names. So there was a situation, I'm going to read a Texas penal code in a minute. There was a situation back in my house in San Antonio. And this was back when my biological sister had moved to the state of Texas before my biological parents moved to the state of Texas. And whether or not Patricia, my biological sister, told Mike and Anna, biological parents, about this situation, I don't know. I don't remember telling them myself because I was being blamed at that time for my biological sister having a threesome in their bed in their house in San Antonio. So there was a little bit of stuff going on at the time where it was kind of like, I didn't think I'd ever have to defend myself for somebody else's choice. But according to Patricia, which she convinced Anna that because I gave my then husband, now dead ex-husband, a hug in front of her, that made her feel lonely, so lonely that she had to have a threesome in our parents' bed in the house that they bought on a bridge loan in San Antonio. I still haven't figured out how that's my fault. I haven't figured out quite a few aspects in that regard when it comes to my biological sister or my biological mother specifically. I think Mike kind of just went along with it because it was one of those, if wifey's happy, lifey's happy sort of thing. And it's like, yeah, but at some point you're going to have to like not let that continue because just saying. However, hopefully, for his sake, that occurred. Nonetheless, my biological sister, I had grounded her for that after I had spoken with one of the parents. I know I didn't have to call the mom, and I spoke with her for quite a bit of time. I did not mean to scare anybody that got that voicemail. I also didn't mean to, you know, it was just one of those, I knew that I had only a certain amount of time because of it being a voicemail, and, you know, just that way it could be clarified. And so after the mom had apparently dropped off her one daughter for her missionary mission, and her other daughter had gotten the message, and then the mom went over to the high school to speak with the son, then she called me, and we spoke for, I think we spoke for like 3.5, 4 hours. She's a very, very nice woman, and I don't mean it in the Anna way of nice. I mean, like, it was actually genuinely pleasant conversation, discussion, and stuff like that, with the exception of certain points that I felt really, really bad for because of her husband's job at the time of what we were discussing at the time. And so I'm glad everybody was safe. Nonetheless, we talked for a while, and she understood where I was at that point in time. She had been involved with having to deal with certain situations, and I was like, yeah, so I had grounded Patricia, I had taken away the car, I had done a few other things, and she threw a temper tantrum and was like, I don't have patience, I don't care. I don't care. I'm not overstepping my bounds. Like, just, especially compared to what I grew up with, please. So there was a point in time where I started, like, lessening the thing, and I was like, you could have some people over. That's fine. You can watch a movie together, whatever. So there were 2 males, another female, and my biological sister who were at my house in San Antonio. They were watching whatever movie, I don't know. And then there was a point where, and I've done a video-ish on this before, so they went outside, and I went to go outside after doing some stuff. And I had hairspray out on the patio table, I had a lighter, a couple of lighters because of my smoking. The hairspray was because of something else that I think I had done Patricia's hair, and so I had used the hairspray and I left it out there because I forgot. And so, whatever. And so, or I was doing something else, whatever it was. And the boy, one of the two boys that was sitting in the chair closest to my house, the male that had hair about this length, and then like a skunk looking streak, because there was this like blonde white streak or whatever in his hair. And he was spraying the hairspray towards my biological sister as well as the two other teenagers on my property. And when I came outside, I said, "You better stop that." Then he aimed it at me. He aimed the hairspray spraying, lighting it on fire, that he was doing to them. My biological sister thought he was cute and funny. No, that's not cute. That's not funny. And so he aimed it at my house. And I was like, "I don't think so. You are not going to cause harm to my son or my daughter. I don't think so." And then, he sprayed it at me. "I don't think so." And so I kept getting closer and he kept spraying more. He's like, "Stop getting closer to me." I was like, "Then stop it." Like, no. And then so there was a point where he shook it up. And, in reference to the other two, and even Patricia at that time, there were quite a few fairies in my backyard. So if they were surprised that they didn't get burned, and they didn't have the wherewithal to move, there were a few fairies and dragons in my backyard that, they stood on watch, they knew. And so, which was part of the reason why I went outside, because I heard them calling like, "Mom." What? "Oh, little boy, stop that." And so that's, it is what it is. And so,
I mean, some people will mistake fairies as angels because of not necessarily knowing the difference between fairies and angels. There's that understanding.
So the boy, he continued to spray. I was like, I don't I don't care. Like, stop it. Now, because he was close to the laptop that was on the table, it's one of those, there's a problem. Because of my personal issues ever since my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 with technology. And so it was one of those, okay, how do, as quick thinking as I could, what is the safest way? Because if I've noticed if I get too angry, too whatever, the stuff that occurs, not like if my pain levels shoot up, I know that I've seen certain things. There are people who haven't believed me over the years. I think at this point there are a few people who are like, no, we know. we saw it, we got it, we know. And it's one of those, at that time, that being, I think it was 2003, very few people believed me at that time, unless they had seen it with their own eyes in person. And it was just one of those, as quickly as I could think, it's one of those, what is going to be the safest way? Because of the laptop being there, and it was plugged in. So those who know techie stuff and have seen the issues that I have with techie stuff, like Geek Squad, they might not have seen it in person, but they have seen the after effects, so they know. And then other stuff, that being plugged in the wall, that was a danger, especially with the amount of lighters that I had on the patio table at that time. I mean, not just the fact that the one that the boy was using had been one of the barbecue lighters, but like the amount of full bunch of little lighters. Anybody who's a smoker knows you usually have like a whole bunch of lighters no matter what. all over the place just in case for that moment you know you're gonna need it. And you don't need to be angry looking for one. Just the worst thing you want to deal with, which at some point you get the flame, but okay. So however many full lighters of fluid. And so I quickly looked over and I was like, you need to stop, and I could only get so close. Which realistically, I was only 2 to 3 feet away from the boy. However, because of the laptop being less than a foot from him, it was one of those, ooh. The safest choice was to walk upstairs, calm down as best as I could, despite being infuriated that I had to go upstairs, open up the Gamma 3 gun safe, be electrocuted with each, because yeah, those who have the understanding of my issues with technology know that with each punch of the code that I got zapped. I guess I could give a reference in regards to Seattle, Washington, when trying to do the bathroom codes, or the code to get into the bathroom, the electric issues with that, where my son had to literally punch in the code because I just, first off, couldn't remember, and then number two, because I was being zapped. That is the equivalent of what occurred. Now, I remembered the code. I remembered it was 1776. I picked the code to be put in there. Nonetheless, I still had to deal with the zapping. I didn't change that. And then, when it opened up and got I think it was the Glock 45 that was in there. I don't know if it was the Baby Desert Eagle. One or the other. It was either the Glock 45 or the Baby Desert Eagle. One or the other. That was kept in that one. And so, walked downstairs, trying to remain calm. The boy was still using the hairspray, because it was one of the mega sizes. So, still using that, lighting it on fire. And so I got, outside, and I'm like, this is literally one of the few times I know for a fact my hands were not shaking. And my hands twitch and shake very easily. So I remember distinctly, my hands were not shaking at all. And for me, and those who have known me, they know how twitchy I am at times. So I was one of those, you need to stop. And nobody had seen that I had a firearm. Nobody. I mean, granted, it was, nighttime, and it was black, and is what it is. But you need to stop. Boy went and sprayed the flames towards me. And very simple. And magically he put the not click, did the, and I guess that was probably the Baby Desert Eagle. And so, because I had to cock it. I don't think you have to cock a Glock, I don't know. Anyway, cocked it. Is what it is. Magically, the boy put the hairspray can down, put the lighter down, yelled, I don't care. I've been yelled at a few times. You're just a little teenager. No. So, my dad's a sheriff, he's a police officer. Yeah, and your dad's going to tell you that I had every right to do this. No, you don't know what you're talking about. No, I'm telling you. I have every right to defend not just myself, my property, my son and my daughter in the house, and the other 3 teenagers, so the male and female, and then my biological sister as well, technically. But all of my neighbors. Because if my house goes up in flames, because of the fence line at that time, the fence lines were about 10, 11 years old. They would have caught up like a tinder, like just all around. And it would have started essentially there, and it would have gone up until where the dividing green belt area was. but one good gust of wind and the flames could have caught to the other fence line on the other side and then continued all the way around the rest of the neighborhood, including to, ironically, the president of the homeowners association that I had dealt with that was a police officer. Like, ironically, even all the way out to his house and then the way around. Because just one gust of wind. Fire department guys would probably be able to give like the very quick understanding on that in that regard. So I'm going to read the Texas Penal Code if that boy didn't want to believe, or my biological sister didn't want to believe, that I legally had the right. Now this also comes into regards of my Medal of Honor art project. I very much understand that there were cherubim ones, as I labeled them, who caused problems to my Medal of Honor art project, who stalked me. So if hypothetically there are any in the nearby vicinity, this same law hypothetically applies to 725 and the boy that decided he wanted to come up to my apartment to tell me that I couldn't wear heels, aside from the fact that he's living in an apartment with one of the males that I saw at the Blue Moose Club in Iowa. So Iowa to the state of Texas, not forgetting the couple that are in 736 that look like the couple from the Montana Vortex. So this law legally applies. If, I hope I don't have to use it. I hope that, the stuff that I have sent out to law enforcement guys, I hope for that sort of justice. However, there is the realistic aspect of this particular penal law that I've known it's in existence. I didn't know that it, like, this specific number. So I'm going to read that information and then upload the thingamabob.
But I will also add, in regards to what I told Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kirkendall Jr.,
he should have felt lucky that not one person sniped him and every other person in that 151 Road Warrior thing for that San Antonio Fiesta, Texas thing. With the amount of military, law enforcement, every different branch in that vicinity as they went around the 1604 loop.
By technicalities.
I think that, I told him that I think that this penal law could have actually been a justifiable thing because of the people's homes, their safety, their families, and so on and so forth. And while, yes, I admit I didn't know who to speak with because I didn't know the names at the time, but I also had been threatened so many times and had gone through what I had. I mean, it's not like it was just my now dead ex-husband who told me that. And not just Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kirkendall Jr., who told me that. My ex-sister-in-law, Susie Marie Nichols Lopez, told me that. Later, Mary Evangelina Nichols Osteen, my other ex-sister-in-law, she told me that. I had other people that I had known over the years. Oh, we'll just use your head injury against you. How is that fair? How is that right? How is that justice? So, I'm going to read this penal code. That's kind of funny. Because I'm simple-minded, so I have to giggle because of I made a joke. Every now and then I need an introversional penal injection, not realize. Though it has to be more happening. It's someone that I can trust and not just anyone. Anyway, so according to the SCLG law group, the Texas self-defense laws are: in Texas, self-defense is defined by Texas Penal Code 9.31 or 9.31. This section states that a person is justified. This section states that a person is justified in using force against another when and to the degree the individual reasonably believes that the force is immediately necessary to protect against the use or attempted use of unlawful force. Proving self-defense can be difficult, however. Yeah, when you have a head injury because of Palm Sunday in 2000, yeah. Anyway, proving self-defense can be difficult, however. People can only claim self-defense when they only use the minimum amount of force necessary for self-defense, reasonably believe that force was necessary to stop someone else's use of unlawful force, did not provoke the attack, and were not engaged in a crime at the time of. If successful, self-defense is a complete defense to a criminal allegation. It justifies the use of force to repel the threat of violence against oneself. Under the Castle Doctrine, I don't know what penal code that is, these rights are the strongest when people are defending themselves at home. For example, that time with the boy and the fire. Self-defense can also be invoked in the defense of property. It generally does not require attempt to retreat before using force. And I didn't retreat, technically. This makes Texas a stand-your-ground state. Irony of the Latin there. In some cases, deadly force may be justified in self-defense. Deadly force can even be used to defend property, in reference to the aspects of the city of San Antonio. So, Texas self-defense law includes the defense of others as well. Successfully raising the defense can absolve the defendant of liability for a crime. 1. What is self-defense? Self-defense is a legal defense to an allegation of a violent crime. Defendants who argue they acted in self-defense claim that their conduct was justified. It was justified because it was not only done to prevent someone else's use of unlawful force, but to protect themselves. Self-defense is a common defense strategy in certain criminal cases, among are assault, murder, manslaughter, and domestic violence. 2. When can someone legally defend themselves? Texas's self-defense law allows people to defend themselves when faced with unlawful force. However, the person has to reasonably believe the force is immediately necessary. Whether that belief was reasonable is a crucial aspect of the defense. And so, like in regards to my Medal of Honor art project, if such individuals continued to follow me and stalk me into the state of Texas, whether or not they came from the state of Texas, the fact of being in the state of Texas and going wherever I would be a lawful defense for me to utilize deadly force. Does Texas follow the Castle Doctrine? Yes, Texas follows the Castle Doctrine when the people are at home, work, or in their car. Their right to use self-defense is at its greatest. The law will presume that the use of force was reasonably necessary as long as the person did not provoke the victim and was not committing a crime other than a traffic offense. If neither of these, and again, in regards to the car aspect, when in the state of Montana in that red Hyundai causing traffic backup. If neither of those are the case, self-defense is presumed to be justified. However, so if the victim that was being attacked wasn't provoked, they wouldn't have to use self-defense. Though if the victim that was being attacked and provoked by the criminal, there's self-defense that's allowed. And when not committing a crime. And yeah, I have this thing, I don't want to break any laws. So that might be weird, it is what it is. However, the person must have also had a reason to believe that there was unlawful breaking and entering and or the victim was unlawfully removing the defendant from the house, car, or place of employment. You know, like for example, how I wound up in Washington State instead of staying in the state of Texas after being targeted at the Cowboys Dancehall. Actually, these are the pants similar to what I wore the night of the Stoney LaRue concert. They're probably missing some of the rhinestones, but yeah. Shiny pins.
Just in case. And this is kind of close to the pink
For the corset that I was wearing with the little flutterbys. The castle doctrine also presumes that self-defense was reasonably necessary if reasonably believed the other was committing aggravated kidnapping. I just brought that up. Murder, sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault, robbery, or aggravated robbery. So, like, for example, with that scuba diver Joe, I could have probably used his own firearm against him. That was underneath the pillow on the bed. Instead, I just threw him across the room. And left.
See, within reason.
Right? I think so. 4. Are there times when the defense is not allowed? There are certain situations where self-defense is not a defense strategy. This includes when the defendant responded with force to strictly verbal provocation. So, for example, when Kevin just continued to run his mouth at the Cowboys Dancehall, I didn't hit him. Just because he, ran his mouth and then verbally assaulted the police officers. Though I took care of that. I mean, not fully, but, I let him know that was unacceptable. I'm talking smack about the police officers. Just saying. Who are you going to call when there's an emergency? You're going to call the police officers. So why would you be rude to police officers? I'm just saying. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. Just pointing that out there. Resisted an arrest by a police officer, even if it was unlawful, that did not use excessive force. Consented to the victim's use of force. Provoked the victim's use of force and did not abandon the encounter. So, again, that Scuba Joe issue. I left. Didn't continue. And I don't... I mean, if I'm being provoked repeatedly and then say, well, if you're gonna, provoke me, then come on, that's self-defense by technicalities. Because you're gonna keep coming at me, right? I can't be the only person. 5, how much force can be used, especially in regards to after stalking across state lines? How much force can be used? The amount of force used in self-defense has to be reasonable. It cannot be disproportionate to the unlawful force threatened. When too much force is used, it can be a crime. The person claiming self-defense could be liable for assault or even murder. In the reference given, irony. Jack is an adult bodybuilder. A 10-year-old boy tries to punch Jack. To stop the attack, Jack pulls out his gun and shoots the boy. Obviously, overuse of force. Irony on the Jack issue. Cactus Jack. 6. What about deadly force? Texas allows the use of deadly force in self-defense in limited circumstances. It can be only used when the person reasonably believes it is necessary to protect against the victim's use or attempt to use deadly force, the imminent commission of the following crimes: aggravated kidnapping, murder, sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault, robbery, or aggravated robbery. 7. What if someone else was being attacked? The use of force to defend someone else is justified if the person reasonably believes that he or she would have been able to claim self-defense if they had been in the shoes of the person being attacked and their intervention immediately necessary. For example, the fire aspect when it came to, even though my biological sister, but her two friends as well. And then the rest of my neighbors in that house at the time. My house, but nonetheless. Example, Claire sees someone else getting beaten up. She rushes over to intervene and stop the assault. Quite clear. 8. Is Texas a stand your ground state? Yes, Texas is a stand your ground state. The law allows defendants to use self-defense without withdrawing first. People can stand their ground and use self-defense if they had a lawful right to be where they ended up using force in self-defense, did not provoke, and were not engaged in criminal activity at the time. This applies to the use of deadly force as well. For example, given from the website, SCLG, Dale is in his driveway when Tom approaches, brandishing a knife. Dale does not need to run into his house before using force in self-defense. 9. What if only property was at issue? Texas extends its self-defense rights to the protection of property. So like when that boy aimed the fire towards my house. People can use force, even deadly force, to protect their property. Likewise, with self-defense, people have to believe reasonably their use of force is immediately necessary. How many times did I tell them to stop? More than like 5 or 10. It also has to be, in reference to the fire aspect, it also has to be proportionate to the victim's conduct. Likely, most other states, deadly force can sometimes be used in the protection of property in the state of Texas, like Montana state. 10. Who has the burden of proof? People claiming they acted in self-defense have to raise some evidence to support their claim. Just saying. All that out there. Once the defense has been raised, the burden of proof shifts to the prosecutor. The prosecutor has to persuade the jury that the defendant did not catch, and the prosecutor has to persuade the jury that the defendant did not act in self-defense. This has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And so that's Texas Penal Code 9.31A as in alpha. And it goes all the way to Texas Penal Code 9.31, .32, .33, .31E as in echo, .32, C as in Charlie, .41, and .42. An example is Zuliani versus State 97, S as in Sierra, W as in Whiskey, Tree D 589er, Texas Criminal Application 2003. So, I think I have proved my case as in full. And since I have been receiving threats from 2009 telling me that I was going to be kidnapped and taken out of the state of Texas and kept at the foot of my captor's bed up until 2013, which ironically, I did not receive a threat about that after the Cowboys Dancehall. I still received a few threats here and there, but the kidnapping and being kept at the foot of my captor's bed, that threat stopped, ironically. So, while not the most professional at all, clothing-wise, for a visual as best as possible in regards to what I was wearing the night of the Stoney LaRue concert, these were the type of jeans think these actually might have been the exact pair because of this and this, but also the little sparklies. And then I had stiletto heels on, black stiletto heels to be specific. The straps were similar to this, just a little bit thinner. And then it was a white long sleeve shirt, V-neck, but there was the underbust corset that was about a little bit lighter than this shade of pink, probably closer to this. And then there were little flutterbys right here along the, essentially where my ocean is, for law enforcement aspects. And then I had my black leather trench coat that went down to my knees, and then had brass color zippers for pockets. I think it was a jacket I got from Wilson's Leather. I think it was a Pella brand from Wilson's Leather. Saw that coat. I was like, yes. Where do I get it? I want it. I have to make sure it will fit though, but I want it. And I got it. But yeah, so nonetheless, hopefully that clarifies stuff. So share and subscribe to my channel. You guys have a good one.